Did you sell the old woman's house? Eduardo's voice cut through the kitchen silence like a thrown plate. I was frozen behind the pantry door, a glass of water halfway to my lips, breath held as if the sound might break something else inside me. Yes, I signed yesterday. She hasn't found out, Victoria answered, soft and final. My house. The one I had paid for with years of work and small sacrifices. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the tile. I stood among the sharp pieces and understood that I would not stay silent this time. I would not be invisible anymore. That scene did not come from nowhere. It landed like a stone thrown into water, and the ripples reached back into every morning I ever rose before dawn. I need you to know who I am, because the weight of what they tried to take was not only a roof but a lifetime of choices. My name is Gabriela Torres. For decades my life was built around a promise I made to myself and to a child I held close when the world narrowed to two bodies and a single plan. I have always believed that work, done honestly, could become a home. I believed in loyalty because it seemed the only currency I could trade, my hours, my back, my hands. I believed in small, steady savings. I believed in the quiet dignity of showing up. My house sat on a quiet street in Mexico City, a modest place with warm walls and a little garden that I tended as if the plants were pages in a book I was still writing. The gate creaked in a familiar way. The door sometimes stuck in the summer, opening with a reluctant sigh. Those small sounds are what I miss when I think of the morning the truth came tumbling out. The house was more than mortar to me, it was the end of a long road. It was a ledger of every honest peso I ever managed to hide away. I started working when I was 25, and at first it was just the work that kept us alive. Those years are a map of early mornings and late nights. I remember lining up for the bus in the dark, the city blinking awake, and the way my breath fogged in the air. I remember the smell of chemicals and lemon oil in the houses I cleaned, the precise motion of my hands as I polished silver that belonged to families who woke up and left without noticing the person who set the cups in order. I remember learning the rooms of other people's houses like secret languages, which curtains the light liked, which rugs collected dust in corners, which drawers people never opened. Every peso I earned had a plan. I divided what I made into small compartments in my head. One part for Victoria's needs, one part for food and bills, one part for emergencies, and the rest folded into an unspoken bank I called the house fund. I deny myself things that others might call small mercies. I wore what lasted, mended shoes instead of replacing them, ate the same food so that Victoria could go to school with clean clothes and so that the saving could continue. I stockpiled afternoons and quiet Sundays the way some people save jewelry. There were decades of this rhythm. I carried my work home on my skin, the faint smell of starch, the calluses on my palms from straightening collars and wringing cloths. Each ache had a purpose. Each small victory, Victoria passing a class, a teacher's praise, a year without debt was a brick. I would tell myself late at night, every coin is a brick, and I believed it. The metaphor kept me going, heavy as it was. I have always been a woman who closed doors gently. I learned to be small in the spaces I inhabited so others could expand. It felt like respect, at first. It felt like keeping peace. Over time that softness curdled into invisibility. People assumed I would take it, that my world had only ever been work and duty. I moved between households, cleaning, cooking, ironing, and itinerant presents sewn into other people's memories but not theirs to keep. I became the person everyone relied on and the person no one ever protected. Some of the families I served treated me like family. Others barely acknowledged me. There were kind hands and small gifts, a blouse given away, an extra tamale, words of thanks on holidays. Those gestures mattered. They were not equal to money, but they were human currency, recognition that was nourishment in a different way. I collected them in my chest and they kept me warm through long months. I never asked for more. I thought that what I did, quietly and reliably, would be enough. When I finally had enough saved for a down payment, it felt like arriving. The papers were a thin, trembling promise. I remember holding the deed the way other women hold rosaries, tight and reverent. I went to the registry and signed the papers with a careful hand. The house keys were metal and ordinary, but in my fist they felt like thunder. I planted a small orange tree in the backyard the morning we got the keys, and I named it for the day itself. For the first time in my life I had a place that would not be taken away if the work dried up or if someone changed their mind. For 30 years I built and guarded that little life. I swept floors until late, mended torn hems, fixed a loose tile, painted once in a fit of pride, and kept the house ready to receive family on Sundays. I could not imagine my daughter, my grandchildren, ever not knowing the warm corners I made. The house was my ledger, my safety, my stubborn proof that sacrifice could be transformed into something enduring. And yet, the thing I built to hold my rest became, in a single decade, a problem for others. The men with hidden debts and sudden schemes have a way of turning what is sacred into collateral. The feeling of betrayal is not only that they took something physical. It is that they took the quiet testament of my years and turned it into a marketable object. The real theft is not the sale itself but what the sale did to the idea of who I might be. I never thought the betrayal would come from inside the family. I never thought the people eating at my table would be the ones to sell the house while I rested in another room. But there are different kinds of hunger, and some eat away at what is not theirs until nothing is left. In the months before that terrible afternoon, small signs threaded through ordinary days like a hidden seam, calls ignored, quick excuses, favors that became demands. Those months were a slow erosion. I noticed the phone no longer buzzed with the same regularity. Victoria stopped sharing small things, her day's gossip, the child's jokes. She grew skittish with money, and I mistook it for embarrassment about being behind or for the strain of their bills. I told myself not to pry. I told myself that adults need their privacy. I stayed silent, and I worried. I stayed silent, but I did not forget. There were also practical changes I noticed and set aside. A new car in their driveway that came too soon. A brand of cereal I could not afford but they bought without blinking. A package delivered in the middle of the day, wrapped in glossy paper. The little neighbor who liked to watch our family fold laundry hung back one weekend and asked if they were moving. I made excuses in my head, a loan, a gift, a temporary expense. I told myself many things to calm the quick beat of fear. I did not want to be the woman who accused without proof. One afternoon, I went to the bank to deposit what I could from a week's work and the teller looked at me with an expression I did not expect. "Mrs. Torres, are you sure you want to make this deposit?" she asked, small and careful. My stomach tightened. "Our records show a large withdrawal last week." The words felt like cold water. I told her there must be a mistake. I told myself it was a clerical error. But when I saw the transaction slip, my name was written there next to an amount I had never authorized. My heart made a small, terrible leap. The bank offered to investigate. The manager said the word fraud slowly, like a new and dangerous spell. The copy of the signature they showed me was a clumsy imitation. I have always been careful with my signature, practiced it 1,000 times on permission slips and forms, but this handwriting tried to be mine and failed. The curve of a letter was wrong, the pressure uneven. I touched that paper as if it might explain itself. It did not. It was then that a different kind of anger took root. Not the wild, blinding rage that moves people in movies, but a cold, practical clarity. If they had lifted money from my account, if someone had dared to invent my consent, then I owed it to myself to gather the truth like a net. The house had become a currency again. The man behind the desk looked at me, then at the paper, then at my face. He paled a little, not from guilt, but from the realization that the system had been misused. He agreed to open an investigation and to flag the document as suspicious. The reality that a legal stamp had been misapplied made me feel sick. The power, the supposed signature, the paper that had sent my home spinning toward the market, it all sat there in the bright light of the office like evidence that ordinary people could be numbed by small rationalizations. Meanwhile, I watched Eduardo and Victoria with a caution that felt like learning to walk on cracked tiles. I stopped answering every text immediately. I began to pick up calls and let them go to voicemail. They noticed. At first they tried to charm me back with small affections, then with explanations that sounded like excuses, and then with the hard thing, pleading. Eduardo's voice had a new edge, more practiced, more careful. He tried to normalize their choices as necessity. Victoria cried and said the children needed help. Their words were soft, but their actions had already been loud. In private, I made lists of what mattered most. The deed. The bank records. Witnesses who could say when they had seen papers signed. The notary who had the original file. Receipts that showed payments. A trail. Life is a trail, small bits that lead to the place they want to hide. I took photographs of everything. I saved emails. I left nothing to chance. During those days I also went back to the people who knew me, former employers, neighbors, the lady at the bakery who had once bumped up my change because she thought I might need it. When I told them, they did not gasp and abandon me. To my surprise, they offered what they could, a statement, their memory of an event, an offer to testify. It was not glamorous support, but it was real. It was human and concrete. I stayed silent, but I did not forget who had been kind when I had been younger and poorer. People I had lifted for years now lifted me in return. At home, I started doing something small and mechanical that felt almost like prayer. I went through every drawer and found the small things I had put away to protect them from being used as excuses: passports, old bank books, the original deed tucked into a safe place behind a stack of envelopes. I photocopied everything and hid copies in another house in case someone came to take the originals. I learned to think in duplicates, like a careful archivist. I also learned to lie to the people in my own house. I told them I was tired when they asked why I wasn't coming on Sundays as often. I said I had errands or appointments when really I was making appointments of another kind: meetings at the bank, a quiet talk with a notary, the slow work of putting a case together. The lie sat in my mouth like a tiny stone. I swallowed it because truth, in that moment, needed a structure to stand on before it could be declared. There is a particular small image that crystallizes those weeks for me: the door to our kitchen left slightly ajar. It was not dramatic, just a sliver of light where it should not be. The door had been open that morning when I walked in and heard them talking quietly about finances, and debt, and selling a property. I stood with my hand on the doorknob and felt the door press into my palm like a hesitant threshold. It was a domestic, ordinary image: the handle, the edge of the wood, but it became a symbol of how thin the line between home and estrangement can be. A door can separate a kitchen from a plan. A door can hold the memory of things said and the decision to act. I kept that image with me as I moved through those days of careful fury. I told myself not to let the pain make me howl. It would not help. The law works on the weight of proof, not on the sound of grief. So I collected proof. The people who had once smiled at me while I folded their laundry came forward in ways I had never expected. The notary filed the report. The bank placed alerts and froze certain transactions. I worked quietly and deliberately. I learned to be methodical without being cold. It would be a long fight, I knew. The truth would not right itself in an instant. There would be forms and hearings and signatures and patience measured in weeks and months. There would be the public embarrassment that comes when small private betrayals become legal matters. I prepared myself for that, too. I would not shrink away. And yet, even as I moved through the legal scaffolding, I felt something else change in me. The woman who had once believed her place was to keep silent began to see a new horizon. I began to speak differently, to set small boundaries I had never dared before, to refuse tasks that were meant to take advantage of my kindness. I learned that protecting my dignity was not selfishness but survival. I stayed silent at times, but then I found the right moment to speak, and when I did, my voice had a new, steady weight. When the day came to confront them where it would matter most, where documents and signatures could not be ignored, I was ready. I had the notary's willingness, the bank's records, witnesses, and the legal support of a man who did not flinch at words like fraud. I had also, quietly, assembled the courage that nights of sleeplessness and the rusted ache of betrayal had forged. I would not shout. I had never been a woman of raised hands. I would present facts, and facts have a way of making rooms rearrange themselves. The house I had bought with my labor would not be a line item in someone else's mistake. I would make sure of that. I stayed silent no more. A month before everything cracked open, our Sundays were ritual. The house hummed with the small noises of family plates clinking, boots by the door, the sound of a child running across tiles. I would start to prepare early, stirring a pot so the mole could build its slow, complicated flavor. The kitchen filled with the scent of chocolate and spices and the kind of warmth that arrives from things made with attention. Those afternoons were the heart of what I had fought for. They were the reason I had learned to save pennies and to iron shirts until they held their shape. Sophia would sit at the table and ask me to tell the story of how I bought the house. She loved that story the way other children love fairy tales. "Tell it again, Abuela," she would say, and I would smile and tell them how each coin piled up like a brick. I liked seeing their faces when I described the small, solid steps. I liked that they could imagine a future built from simple persistence. Victoria would smile, sometimes with a distance I didn't always understand. She still loved my mole. She still came and sat with her children. Yet I saw a tiredness in her that sometimes shadowed her features. She explained it as work stress or worry about bills, and I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be the mother who held everything together with a laugh and a plate. Eduardo, as usual, sat with his phone on the table. He scrolled with a thumb that never stopped. His voice was habitually easy in the house, but when he was absorbed he became a little imperceptible, like a radio on low. I noticed him more in the corners of those days, off to the side, making promises to figures I could not see. He laughed easily, the kind of laugh that cuts off when he thinks about money. At times, he offered to help with the chores, and I accepted because I tired of doing everything alone on Sundays. Perhaps that was a mistake, a concession that blurred my boundaries. During one of those lunches, Daniel spilled his water. I bent to pick up the cup and saw Eduardo's lips tighten when he picked up his phone and whispered something under his breath, the house, so low I could barely hear it. I looked up quickly. He put the phone away at once and raised his hand in a shrug as if to say it was nothing. In the silence that followed, Sophia asked me to tell the story again. I did, because the rhythm of the house was my answer in those moments. I kept my worry folded small and careful. We had a neighbor who often wandered over at odd times. Dona Rosa was nosy in the affectionate way people are in neighborhoods where everyone keeps an eye on everyone else. One afternoon she stopped at the gate and told me with a smile that she'd heard someone in the block musing that they would sell a house for this price. Her words were casual. The way she said, "They've lodged like a pebble in my shoe." I made a joke and waved her away. I did not want to be the woman who sowed doubt. I did not want to think the worst of family. I stared at it and felt both the rush of recognition, this is not my hand, and the coldness that comes when the world displays your loss in black and white. That night I could not sleep. The house felt too loud. In the small hours I walked the rooms like someone checking to be sure the walls were still true. Each photograph caught my eye, Victoria at 5 with a crooked grin, a school certificate pinned to a wall, the orange tree planted the morning we got the keys. The images pressed against my ribs, heavy as stones. The next day I went to their house. The key I had kept for emergencies felt heavy in my pocket. I remember the doorknob cold under my hand. I walked into the room where they were speaking in low voices. Voices feel different when betrayal is taking shape, they have an edge that is neither frantic nor calm. I put my hand on the back of a chair, steadying myself the way one steadies a ladder. The papers were on the table. They didn't look like much to someone who did not know the language of property and signatures. To me they were a kind of violence arranged in tidy columns. Victoria looked up when I entered and her face went through a quick set of changes: surprise, guilt, then a pleading I had not seen in years. Eduardo's mouth attempted a smile and failed. He looked at me not as a woman he loved but as someone who could be placated. "We can explain," he said. Words like "we" and "explain" can be dangerous. They are often the shell men hide behind when they have taken things they did not earn. My hands went to my metal box where the deed and the photos were kept. I opened it slowly. The deed felt familiar and fragile in my fingers. I compared it to the papers on the table. Something inside me went quiet. It is funny how certain objects can steady you, how a curled corner of a paper can be your anchor when the room turns stormy. I felt smaller than my anger and larger than my fear at the same time. I had been a woman who tolerated much. I had been patient to a fault. That patience was changing into calculation. Victoria spoke then, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Mom, Eduardo lost everything. I've tried to stop him. We thought this would help. We didn't mean to hurt you. We were going to tell you," but she stopped, as if the words became too heavy to carry. Her eyes were wide and wet. She asked me to understand, to accept, to be the mother who forgives. She asked me to let family remain family. There is a particular betrayal in being asked to forgive without being told the truth first. It is as if forgiveness is requested as a shortcut to erase wrongdoing. It felt like being expected to flatten myself so someone else could stand. The idea of asking forgiveness before giving me the facts was an attempt to reassign my role as the soft, accommodating center of their lives. I sat down and listened. Not because I did not already understand the outline of what happened, but because listening gave me time to measure the facts against my heart. When she finished, when the children's small chairs scraped in the background, Eduardo tried a different tack. He offered practicality, a plan to move together, to combine households, to protect me. He framed this as benevolence. "Live with us," he said. "We can take care of you. The kids will be close." He delivered the line like a man selling a solution. There was a condescension in it that I felt in my bones. It implied that my possession of a home was inconsequential compared to a family's needs. It implied that my independence was an inconvenience. I held my papers in my hand and felt the weight of each choice I had made. For 30 years I had chosen to give, to pride myself on the work of making a place for my family. Now those same choices were being used as evidence that I could be compressed into someone else's space. It felt like erasure, like someone repurposing a life into convenience. Something inside me unclenched then and made room for a different response. I looked at them, and instead of pleading or asking them to change, I spoke slowly and clearly. I told them I would not leave my house. I told them I would not be put into a situation where my possession became their property. The words came out not as accusation but as boundary. My voice did not tremble. It held the years of work and the quiet endurance that had been mine. You sold my house without telling me, I said. You signed things that were not yours to sign. You forged my consent. That is wrong. Eduardo tried to laugh it off. It was just money, Gabriela, he said. We needed to pay debts. You don't need the house on your own. I built that house, I replied. I paid for it with my hands and my sweat. It's not just a place to live. It's the work of my life. There was no dramatic gesture after that. No scene of confrontation like in a film. Instead, a professional, legal atmosphere settled in the room as the notary they had used, the bank records I had collected, and the lawyer's calm voice performed their quiet justice. The notary listened, then looked at the document as if he were reading a lie written in small, tidy letters. He confirmed the falsified signature. The bank agreed to freeze certain transactions and start restitution talks. The lawyer spoke softly about fraud and inheritance laws and protections. Victoria sobbed then in a way that was not only shame but also the sudden cold of reality. Eduardo argued and then grew still. The children clung to them, confused and frightened, and I felt all the affection I had for those small bodies and the ache for a life that had gone crooked. I also felt the unsentimentality of the law moving in its own rhythm, not created for hearts but for facts. In the aftermath of that conversation, decisions were made that changed the household. The sale was annulled. The buyer, faced with evidence and the prospect of legal exposure, withdrew. Money moved in the opposite direction and promises were made to return funds. There was a temporary restraining order placed against Eduardo to keep him away from the property while the judicial process took its course. It was not vengeance, it was protection. Victoria looked at me with eyes that said everything and nothing. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered. She asked for forgiveness in the quiet way children ask for an extra hour of play. I did not answer with a simple yes. Forgiveness, I told her then, is a process. It is not a word you hand over like a coin. It is earned. The trust she had broken would take time to rebuild. I left their house with the deed still pressed against my chest. The sun fell through the trees and the house looked the same as it always had, but the air around it felt different, as if truth had disinfected a wound. I had not wanted this war. I only wanted the quiet dignity of what I had built. What I had done felt simple. I defended a life I had earned. In the weeks that followed, the family rearranged itself. They were living with the knowledge that their choices had consequences. Eduardo entered a program to confront his gambling and find work that did not promise quick riches. Victoria came by more often, tentative and tired, but present. The children kept visiting because children, mercifully, do not keep the ledger of adult mistakes. They still loved my mole and my stories, and laughter returned slowly, not as if nothing had happened, but as if a wound had started to scab over. I learned something that I had not expected in the fight: people can change when the structure around them demands it. The legal process was a blunt instrument that nudged realism into their lives. They faced bills and restitution and hard talking. It was not pretty, but it was real. I also learned about the kindness of others. My old employers, neighbors, and the notary staff offered sustenance in practical ways: meals, company, a watching eye when I was afraid. They were not angels with banners, but ordinary people who met me where I was. It made me see the network I had woven by being present and kind for decades. 6 months later, the house remained my house. The orange tree had new blossoms. The garden was tended by hands that cared about it. Sometimes Victoria would bring the children over, and we would pick fruit together. Sometimes she would settle into a chair and cry into a tablecloth. I would hand her a cup of tea and not ask for explanations. Please consider subscribing. We are a new channel and 1,000 subscribers would mean a community, not just numbers. Small things build up. My house is my ledger. My life is my proof. I kept both. Now, I keep the garden too and teach the children how to tie a knot, how to measure a spice, how to stand steady when the world shifts. The orange tree watches over us, patient and honest. What would you have done in my place? I started to notice the small things first. A missed call. A text left on read. The way Victoria's laughter no longer filled the doorway. It felt like a slow leak I could not find. I remember the Tuesday at the bank as if it pressed into my skin. The fluorescent lights hummed. The queue shuffled. A woman clutched a receipt and pursed her lips. I set my coins on the counter and felt the weight of them like tiny anchors. When the teller tilted the screen toward me, her face changed. She asked me if I was sure I wanted to make the deposit. Her voice was careful. My chest tightened. Something was wrong. I told myself it was a mistake. I watched the teller's hands move over the keyboard like a small confession. She printed a slip and handed it to me with the kind of look that asked more questions than it answered. My hands shook as I read the line that bore my name beside an amount I had never withdrawn. I left the bank with the slip folded in my pocket. The city felt louder on the walk home, like every horn and shout was a footstep behind me. I pressed my palm against the warm metal of the bus rail and tried to breathe into the rhythm of other people's ordinary days. Inside, fear hummed like an old appliance. When I opened the metal box at home, my hands moved by habit. I took out the deed because touching it calmed me. The paper was familiar, creased at the corners. The notary stamp faded where my finger had smoothed it once. I put the deed on the kitchen table and looked around the house the way a stranger might inspect a room before making an offer. The curtains allowed only a strip of light, and the dust on the windowsill looked like a map of all the afternoons I had spent wiping surfaces to make a living. The house did not look like an object to sell. It looked like days. That week the neighborhood made its small cruelties visible. Donna Rosa stopped by for eggs and stood a little too long at the gate. She smiled, but the smile scraped. "They say the whole block is changing," she said. "Prices are going up. People are moving." She tilted her head toward Victoria's house as if the wind might carry secrets. I handed her the eggs and wrapped my arms around something colder than the morning air. I began to watch the pattern of their days. Not because I wanted to become a spy, but because the silence they offered me felt like a lie with edges sharp enough to cut. Eduardo was quieter at the table. His laughter had the careful measure of a man practicing a performance. Victoria flitted from the kitchen to the laundry room with preoccupied hands, voice clipped to the size of chore requests. The children played as if the adults around them were furniture, useful, unremarkable. I noticed the receipts first by accident. I picked one up from the floor of Eduardo's car, half hidden under a child's shoe. The paper smelled of new leather and something antiseptic. There was the name of a travel agency and a number I did not recognize. A car purchase ad was folded under a napkin on his desk. A delivery slip for an appliance was stamped with a date that made my fingers grow cold. Each paper was a small, shining accusation. I tried to believe in explanations. I told myself sometimes out loud that people have needs, emergencies. Money can be borrowed, loans taken, mistakes made. I told myself I had survived worse than worry, that this was only another hole to mend. But a hole that opens near your foundation is not the same as a hole in a curtain. There were tiny exchanges that filled my chest with a bad taste. One Sunday, at lunch, Eduardo brushed past me and said, "We're doing what we must, Gabriella." He said it low as if the words would break if spoken plainly. I looked at him over the steam of my mole. The children laughed at a joke I barely heard. Victoria's silence sat on her shoulders like an invisible coat. I asked him, quietly, what he meant. He smiled and moved the conversation to the weather. The smile did not reach his eyes. I began to catalog the micro things that made a life true. The way Sophia stacked the napkins. The dent in the second step that my foot always found. The nick on the wooden spoon I use every Sunday. These tiny things were the evidence of living, not the ledgers the world believed mattered. I started to list them in my head like proof: the orange tree's new shoots, the chipped tile outside the back door, the old photograph on the mantel. I held these things up to the light as if the light itself could tell me what history I owned. There were the neighbor whispers too. Not loud, never loud. A comment at the tiendita. A question at the school gate. "Are they really moving?" someone asked the woman at the counter, and she lowered her voice as if the word "sale" might call the police. I felt that whisper land against me like a pebble. You live in a small city and everyone knows how rumors breed. The rumor grew legs. I found myself being careful with my voice at home. I stopped answering every message. I let calls go to voicemail more often. I learned to be still and small in the face of other people's storms. A calm woman is a safe woman, I told myself, because we were taught survival like a recipe book. But beneath that lesson something else was stirring, an impatience that tasted like iron. One evening I went to Victoria's house. The children were playing quietly in the living room. Eduardo had the television on mute and his phone face down on the coffee table. He rarely did that. He was a man who welded his attention to a screen. That he'd placed it face down felt like a riddle. Victoria was making coffee with quick, anxious movements. There were cartons on the counter I had not seen before, meal kits, labeled in a language I didn't quite place. I walked into the small office where they keep the bills. The door was ajar, the light low. From the sliver I could see stacks of paper, folders, a pen lay on a pad. A power of attorney envelope peeked out like a heart exposed. It was not dramatic, that moment. It was nearly theatrical in its ordinariness. The envelope had the name of a notary and my address typed on the outside. I touched it and felt the temperature of the paper like a second skin. My thumb left a small print on the corner. I walked back to the kitchen pretending I had only come to return a plate. My plate clicked softly. The sound was small and aloud. At the table Eduardo spoke about a business opportunity, with a confidence so rehearsed it made my teeth ache. He used phrases he trusted other men to nod at: investment, leveraging assets, short-term solution. Victoria kept her eyes on her cup. Sophia looked up and asked me for more mole. Daniel chimed in with a joke about school. They were small islands of normality surrounded by something that smelled faintly of rot. I forced my hands to arrange the napkins and set the table as if my movements could anchor reality. I left that night with the envelope like a secret in my handbag. The walk home was slow. The street lamps painted the pavement in rectangles of bruised gold. My hands felt like gloves that didn't quite fit. I told myself, again, maybe those papers meant something innocent: an authorization for routine matters, a signature to settle an account. I tried to let ordinary explanations soothe me. But the house at the corner seemed different. Its windows looked at me like witnesses. I began to create small tests. Little things to see if my suspicion would show itself in the world. I asked the bank to flag any large withdrawals. I called the notary's office and asked a thin, careful set of questions about recent documents they had handled. Their receptionist used bureaucratic language that felt like a shield. She said they would check, that sometimes clerical errors happen. Her voice was polite, neutral, professional. At home, I played. At the mercado, a man I had once helped with a heavy crate of oranges turned and said loud enough for his friends to hear, "If I had a roof like hers, I wouldn't be so generous either." His words landed like a pebble striking glass. People laughed. I felt the humor like a small fissure. It was not extravagant cruelty, it was the kind that seeds a neighborhood's opinion. These were the micro scenes, each one small and plausible on its own. Each one a string on a loom. I began to see the weaving. The receipts in Eduardo's car, the notary envelope at the office, the bank slip, the new purchases, the gentle distancing from Victoria, the neighbor's murmur. They were not accidents. They were the shape of a decision that tipped into action. I still made excuses for them. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself my age made me jumpy. I told myself that family sometimes made mistakes that needed time to fix. I stayed silent, but I did not forget, I told myself, trying the old mantra on for steadiness. But the list in my head grew longer, until there was no room left for the soft explanations. One night, after the children had gone to bed and the house breathed its small nocturnal sighs, I sat with my hands around a cup of tea and thought about doors. How some doors open to invite, how others are left ajar and betray whisperings inside. I pictured the door of the small office at Victoria's house, the one I'd left slightly open when I'd seen that envelope. The picture of that door in my mind was bright as a revelation. I told myself I would knock next time. I told myself I would not run from the weather of truth. The next day I found a letter slipped beneath my gate. No return address. It contained only a line, "You should know before your neighbors do." I folded the paper back into my pocket like a pact. And then I opened the desk drawer where I kept the pens. I opened it. I walked into the living room because the house held its breath differently that afternoon. Light came through the blinds in slats. The radio was on low. My pulse was the only loud thing. I felt as if I were moving through water. On the desk lay a stack of papers, ordinary at first glance: invoices, a mortgage inquiry, a printout from what looked like an online betting site. My fingers went straight to the notary envelope I had seen before. My name was typed across the front. My hands wanted to push the papers away like a child hiding from a storm. Instead, I unfolded them. The paper felt sterile. The ink was a small conspirator. There it was, the power of attorney, dense with legal language and official stamps. There was a signature where my name should have been. An ink loop claimed me. The curve of a letter was wrong. The pressure was uneven. My own signature had a particular lean, a familiar hesitation in the G, shaped by years of signing receipts, school forms, small contracts for work. This one was bold where I am usually patient. It tried to be me and failed the way a costume betrays the man wearing it. The certainty hit me before I could reason it out. It was my name, but not my hand. A small sound like a plate scraping reached me from the kitchen. Victoria's voice came, tight and small. "We can explain," she said. It was a phrase built to cushion falls. I pressed the papers to the table. The taste of metal filled my mouth. I remember thinking, the law is a language of facts, not of apologies. I carried the papers like evidence to the corner where their family sat. Eduardo looked up as if surprised to see me carrying a burden that belonged in his hands. Victoria's face folded in ways that were both shame and pleading. Sophia and Daniel clustered at their phones or with toys, unaware that an invisible tectonic shift was moving beneath their feet. Eduardo tried to make his mouth into a smile. It did not work. "What is that?" he asked with a caution that tried to be casual. His throat had a dryness to it. He kept asking questions he supposedly already knew the answers to. It was a game I had learned to watch men play, confusion as deflection. I placed the power of attorney on the table, flat and undeniable. The paper lied in plain view. Victoria's hands came up as if to catch a falling lamp. "Mom," she began. Then she stopped. She had the look people wear when they are waiting for permission to confess. The house seemed to lean in. I listened to the clock in the hall mark the seconds like a jury counting minutes. "We did this for you," Victoria said finally, each word measured. "We didn't want to worry you, Mama." "Eduardo," she looked at him for support, or maybe for absolution. He swallowed. "I signed because the buyer was ready and it helped us cover the debts." His voice did not carry the ownership of the words. It sounded borrowed. My hands tightened around the edge of the table. The wood was cool under my palms. "Debts?" I echoed. The word tasted like something stolen. "Whose debts?" Eduardo swiveled his eyes away. "Mine," he said. "I lost money. We thought it would be temporary." "You thought to sell my house," I said. The sentence left my mouth like a stone. It has no polish. It makes no claim to gentleness. It only wanted the truth to land where it belonged. Victoria's shoulders shook with quiet sobs. "The children needed," she tried. "Don't use them," I said in a voice I hardly recognized. I had never spoken that way before. Usually I swallowed the hardest things to preserve the edges of conversation. But the air itself seemed to demand honesty that could not fit beneath platitudes. "Do not let my grandchildren be the shield for your choices." Eduardo snatched the defensive posture he was used to anger as a first aid kit. "You're being dramatic, Gabriella," he said. "It was just paperwork. The buyer will give it all back. We can move past it." The audacity of that phrase, "move past it," was like slapping sunlight off a pane. I looked at the notary stamps, the transfer records I had hidden away in a copy I had requested the day before when my suspicions hardened into work. The buyer's name stared up, another stranger in the life I had built. Money transfers, a deposit cleared. The ledger was clinical. Fraud is burrowing in numbers. I asked one small question that was perhaps the only question that mattered. "Did you forge my signature?" Eduardo's face pulsed color as if someone had turned a dimmer switch too quickly. For the first time his mouth trembled and did not find a joke to hide behind. He glanced at Victoria like he might be looking for the ground. I signed a paper," he said, voice small. "I thought you wouldn't mind. We were desperate. There is a betrayal that is loud and theatrical. This was not it. This betrayal was quiet, administrative. It was legalese that ate the foundation of my life. It was a man putting a pen where faith should have been. I felt the world tilt not because of loud actions but because of the cold, small bureaucracies that men like Eduardo mistook for easy solutions. "You thought my consent was optional," I told them. The words were a blade that cut both ways, hurt and clarity. Victoria begged. She unspooled the story, Eduardo's gambling app, the loans he'd taken, the hour-by-hour decisions that had tiptoed past responsibility. "We were going to tell you," she said. "We wanted to protect you from stress." Her voice was thin with the strain of someone trying to mend a crack with glue. "Protect me by theft. Protect me by making my life a bargaining chip. Protect me by erasing my labor with a stamp." The logic was asinine and poisonous. I felt every year of saving settle into a hard, hot band across my chest. I realized then that for them I had become an asset, not a person, a resource to be liquidated when times were poor. I am not collateral, I said. My house is not a plan B. Eduardo tried flattery next. He told me about their difficulties. I had the paper, the records, witnesses, neighbors who could say who had passed my door, bank statements that showed the withdrawals, a copy of the power of attorney in which the handwriting made clear the forgery. I had assembled a trail like breadcrumbs that led back to them. I had proven what betrayal had tried to hide. Victoria dissolved into something that was not part of the neat legal vocabulary. She sobbed, the sound of someone who had built her life on an error she could not excuse. She reached for my hand and I flinched as though her touch might be the hour that anthracite memory stripped clean. My children, she said through broken breath. They won't understand. I thought of Sophia and Daniel and how their small worlds would be pulled into this adult storm. I thought of the quiet teachings we give to our children: honesty, respect, and how those seemed like relics in the face of a mechanic's quick fix. I wanted to shield them. But shielding demanded action, not silence. You asked me to forgive before you told me the truth, I said. You asked me to save you by handing over what I had saved all my life. That's not family. That's theft. Eduardo's face turned a color I have seen only in men caught unprepared, the mixture of shame and calculation. He tried to bargain. If the buyer returned the funds, he reasoned, could we move on? Could we erase what had happened? He used a word they always used around money: settle. It sounded like a business, not a life. I did not shout. I had never been a woman of raised hands. I had always believed facts arrange rooms. So I presented the facts. The notary's voice narrated the legal options: annulment, restitution, criminal charges. The bank promised to freeze certain movements. My lawyer, whom I had called in secret the week before, sat beside me and spoke in a calm, practical voice that made each legal term feel like a tool rather than a threat. We can petition the court to reverse the sale, file for forgery, request an interim injunction. You have the paperwork. We need signatures and sworn statements. Victoria looked at me with a face wearing every human shame. Mom, she whispered. She wanted forgiveness to be immediate like a bandage. She wanted me to erase things with mercy. She wanted to be hugged and absolved. The temptation to fold was there. Old habits of holding a family together flickered like a shy candle. But I had seen the papers. I had felt the signature that was not mine. I had counted my years like bricks and knew their weight. I'll not return to being invisible, I said quietly. I'll not let my life be used as someone's convenience. I looked at Eduardo and there was no heat in my voice, only a cold clarity that had been sharpened by proof. You will return what you took. The notary prepared documents. The buyer, informed, hesitated at a decision that meant financial embarrassment and legal exposure. The bank began steps to reverse the first transfer. The scene was not cinematic. It was paperwork and slow, bureaucratic wheels turning toward an outcome. But in that velocity of small acts, justice began to move. The sale was marked to be annulled. They asked me not to press charges. They begged me to keep this inside the family. They promised restitution. They promised therapy. They promised change. Victoria's eyes said everything a woman's eyes can say when she begs for mercy. The children shuffled their feet and watched the adults like they were watching storm clouds form. I held my papers and felt the weight of the decision in my lap. I thought of my hands that had scrubbed, pressed, folded, tended. They were not hands to be written over by a stranger's ink. I thought of the orange tree and the way it had grown taller than last year. Its branches would still hold fruit even if people tried to sell the soil beneath it. I signed the annulment papers with a steady hand. Outside, the day seemed ordinary. Inside, a lawman's files and a notary's stamps rearranged what had been thought irrevocable. The buyer agreed to withdraw. Money would be negotiated. An order was written to keep Eduardo away during the legal process. None of this healed what had been broken, but it stopped it from disappearing altogether. I left the room with the deed pressed to my chest like a rosary. I did not forgive that day. I set boundaries. I declared the terms. I chose protection over the easy comfort of forgiveness. My voice did not tremble when I said it. It had the steady pitch of someone who had learned at last how to say no. But the wounds were raw. The house that had been the scene of warmth now bore the marks of betrayal. When I stepped outside, the air on the porch was fresh and sharp. The orange tree cast its patient shadow. I felt the relief of having kept a life peace of mine. I also felt the emptiness of what had been lost. Victoria reached for my arm and I let her. I allowed her the small mercy of being near. I would not let her step into my rooms without proving she could keep them safe. Later, when the children were asleep and the house hummed its soft domestic tune, I placed the copy of the notary's stamp next to the deed. I sat with my hands folded and thought of how one paper had tried to erase a lifetime. I whispered to the empty walls that I would not be erased. And then I found the envelope with the last bank slip again and set it aside, ready to follow the money if it tried to run. I slept that night with the quiet clench of victory and loss braided together. I had stopped the sale. But what remained was the task of rebuilding the trust that had been turned into currency. I knew this would be slow. I knew there would be days the wounds would ache. I also knew that I had changed. I would not be the same woman who folded and smoothed and remained invisible just to keep a roof over someone else's head. The next morning I woke early. The light on the kitchen tiles was thin and precise. I stood at the window and watched my orange tree. A blossom had opened like a small triumph. I took a breath and reached for the deed. I opened the drawer where I kept the original documents. The night after the notary, sleep eluded me like a shy animal. I sat on the back steps with my hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The orange tree's scent came in slow waves. The house held the quiet of things remembered. I felt both lighter and heavier relief for stopping the sale and the weight of what had to come. I thought of every early morning I had left this house for work. There was a catalog in my head, the wake up at 4 a.m., the bus rides, the hands scrubbed raw, the collar starch, the small favors, the years. Each memory was an evidence ledger. I kept running them through like beads on a string. I asked myself how to repair a life that had been used without consent. The days that followed were not cinematic. They were composed of small, hard steps. I visited the bank again to ensure the alerts were still in place. I sat with the lawyer and signed forms that felt more like armor than paperwork. We discussed how to proceed if the buyer tried to resist repaying, what to do if Eduardo attempted to come near the house again. The lawyer, Martinez, used the word strategy like a compass. It made me feel steadier to have a plan. There were quiet acts of kindness that surprised me. The senora from the bakery left a package by my gate with 3 sweet rolls and a note that read, "With you always." A woman from the church came by with a thermos of soup and a hand on my shoulder that said, "Without words, you are not alone." These small human things were not legal remedies. They were the soft scaffolding that holds a person upright when the law fixes the architecture. I accepted each gift with a gratitude that felt like reclaiming dignity. Some people withdrew. Some did not know how to be with the truth. There was embarrassment and gossip and the slow prying curiosity of neighbors. The world is a small place and news travels like wind. I felt exposed sometimes, as if my life was now an object on a market shelf and everyone could appraise it. It stung. I liked privacy. I liked my routines. I liked the low hum of my own life. Inside the house I rearranged things like someone making space for a new routine. I moved the old sewing table I answered with a tenderness that felt like mending a coat. I told them we would talk when the time was right. I told them a story about how every coin is a brick and that sometimes bricks need time to settle. The community stepped in ways I had not expected. Women I had worked for in the past came by and offered statements that said, in different words, "She is who she says she is." They said things about my schedule, about genuine signatures, about a life of careful thrift. They came to the bank with me. They came to the notary. They spoke with the calm authority of people who had been seen by me when I was invisible to others. Their presence was quiet power. But not everything was support. A cousin I had not seen in years said, as if trying to rationalize wrongdoing, "Well, can't she forgive and move on?" The question cut because it suggested that forgiveness is always the easy exit for those who have wronged, and the burden is on the injured to be gentle as the world demands economy. Forgiveness, I had learned, cannot be coerced. It must be earned. I spent a morning going through old albums. Photographs have a way of settling argument. There I was with Victoria as a toddler, hair in pigtails, and me smiling with a pride that felt like muscle. There we were at her graduation, me folding napkins in the background. The images were proof of a life passed through love and labor. I put the album on the table and opened it when I felt small. It steadied me. There were practical necessities too. I learned the process of legal filings, how a petition moves through the court, the time frames, the hearings. I learned the names of clerks and which coffee shop had the best empanadas near the courthouse. Practicality became my ally. The more mundane the tasks, the more they anchored me. I found strength in the repetition of small tasks as if each one were a stitch. I also had nights of deep anger. I woke with my chest tight and thought of all the times I had apologized to smooth things over, times I had kept my mouth closed to avoid being labeled a troublemaker. I thought about how being good had been confused with being disposable. I was good, I told myself, but goodness is not a permission to be used. I let the anger be a teacher. It taught me that protection begins with a refusal to be erased. One afternoon, Martinez called to say the buyer had withdrawn his offer rather than get entangled in a legal fight. It was not a moral victory so much as a necessary one. The funds were scheduled to be returned and a path toward restitution was set in motion. It felt like sweeping the floor after a spill, necessary but not celebratory. I felt exhausted and relieved in equal measure. Victoria asked me once, quietly, whether I regretted anything. It was the question that always seemed to arrive in the quietest moment, the one that asks for clarity like a mirror. I thought about all the moments I had swallowed and considered whether I might have done things differently. I thought of the times I had accepted favors when I should have set boundaries earlier. But then I thought of my hands, which had built and held and stitched. I would not undo the hands that had loved. I had learned to protect them. Slowly, the household rearranged itself. Eduardo found odd jobs and tried to pay back small amounts. He attended meetings and took steps that his therapist said signaled accountability. It was work to watch, sometimes painful, sometimes hopeful. Victoria came by with the children and sometimes we would sit on the porch and peel oranges together. She cried sometimes and I made her tea and said nothing more demanding than, "We do what we must next." The children laughed and so did the sunlight. I began to accept offers from old acquaintances to help in small ways. Senora Martinez hired me for a few hours to help organize her office, lighter work than the cleaning I had done before, a different kind of dignity. I was paid, and more importantly, not invisible. I started to see that my worth was not merely in the sacrifices I had made for others, but in the fact that I still had skill, patience, and a life to steward. There were community meetings where women shared stories and asked questions quietly about protection of assets and elder rights. I spoke at one of these meetings. I told my story plainly. I watched faces listen and nod. Some women had their own small scars. We exchanged numbers at the end. We were not saving the world, but we were building something like a network, eyes and ears who would look out for each other. At night I began to sleep more. Not because everything was solved, but because I had set boundaries that kept me safe enough to rest. I returned to the rituals I loved: cooking mole on Sundays, trimming the bougainvillea. The garden needed attention, and that alone was an anchor. Plants do not care for your history as much as they care for your care. They demand watering, and in return they show up every bloom season with patience. Months passed. There were hearings, meetings, restitution figures discussed, signatures signed. The legal world moved at its own measured speed. People adjusted around the new reality. Eduardo's access to the house was restricted for the time being. He learned to be on the other side of a door. It was necessary. The children still loved him. Children love fiercely and without indices of injustice. That is both a mercy and a complication. I stayed regular in small ways. I maintained the house. I mended a shirt for Sophia and taught Daniel how to tie a bow properly. We read books and I showed them how to fold towels the way their grandmother taught me. These were small acts of normalcy that felt like reclamations of what family could be when stripped of the pretenses and bargains. I thought often about the women who might not know how to fight, who had signatures forged or pensions diverted, who thought silence was the only way to keep peace. I wanted to tell them that there are tools, that the law can help, that neighbors can witness, that photocopies matter, that old employers can be allies. But I knew also that the truth lands differently for everyone. Not everyone has the luxury of a lawyer's ear or the time to collect witnesses. So I spoke gently and loudly in equal measure. I offered what I had, my story, my proof, my time. Not everything healed. Trust once broken mends with seams visible. The house still held the echo of that trench. At times Victoria's presence was a soft pressure like a bruise. She asked for forgiveness and then tested the edges of boundaries. Forgiveness would come, perhaps, bit by bit, like new plaster over cracked wall. It would not erase the scar, but it would allow us to inhabit the room again. One evening, sitting under the orange tree with a cup of tea that had cooled, I watched the children play tag. Sophia dashed, hair wild, and Daniel tripped and laughed. The ordinary joy of them felt like a small miracle. I felt at peace in a way I had not for months. The house was still mine. The deed rested in its folder where it belonged. I had kept what I had built. I wrote in my little notebook that night. I listed the things I had learned, that dignity could be defended, that age is not a sentence to silence, that love does not require erasure, that one can be both kind and firm. I wrote that forgiveness is a path and not always immediate. I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer with the deeds. Before bed, I stepped inside and touched the photograph on the mantel, the one where Victoria was a child with curls and I was laughing with flour on my hands. I pressed my palm to the glass and whispered a promise into the quiet. I will keep this house, I said. I will keep this life. Outside, the orange tree rustled and dropped a small blossom into my palm. It was a simple, honest gift. I walked to bed with that blossom in my hand and set it on the bedside table like a small talisman. I started that morning with my hands in the drawer where I kept the small things that have steadied me for years: a stub of a pen, a ribbon from a child's present, the metal box with my papers. My chest felt hollow and focused at once. I breathed slow and told myself the truth. Fear does not have to be the boss of me. I moved carefully, like someone tracing old footsteps so they do not wake a sleeping animal. I made copies of everything. I photographed the forged power of attorney with my phone. I traced the bank stamps with my finger until the ink pattern sat in my memory like a map. There was comfort in ordinary places. Coffee in the corner, a clerk who stamped papers with a small mechanical thud. The world kept making tiny noises while my life remade its rules. Kalei, mas neo skc. I went back to the bank and asked for a formal report of the withdrawals. The clerk at the counter recognized me and lowered her voice. "We'll open a fraud file," she said. She printed the transaction logs and circled the questionable transfers. The paper felt heavier after that, not because of weight but because it had the authority of ink and bank seals. I made a list of places to visit: notary, real estate office, buyer's agent, and the municipal property registry. Each stop was another stitch in a repair that had to be sewn carefully. At the notary I asked for a copy of the sign-in book and any video records in the office on the dates the documents were recorded. The notary at first shifted his eyes. Then, after seeing my face and my ID and the copy of the forgery, he agreed to help. He made calls, typed notes. He told me to expect slowness. The law moves like an old clock and to be patient. I answered with a patience I had not felt before. It was the patience of someone preparing for a long row. I called a neighbor who used to watch the street like a hawk. She gave me a detail I had not known. A delivery van had stopped at Eduardo's house twice on the day of the notary appointment. It seemed small, almost irrelevant, but it fit into the mosaic of odd movements. I wrote it down. There is strategy in not telling everyone everything. I kept a tight circle. Only Martinez, a few past employers, and 2 neighbors knew the breadth of what I had found. To others I was a woman dealing with paperwork. To some I was simply busy. I let that be enough. Discretion was a weapon. At night, when the house was quiet, I sorted receipts on the kitchen table while the orange tree threw a soft perfume through the open window. The scent of citrus and the hum of a faraway radio were companionable. I folded each paper the same way I had folded laundry for years, careful, precise, like a ritual. Each fold was an act of custody. There were small practical lessons. I learned which phone record would prove calls. I found out that some emails retain metadata if not deleted. Martinez explained how to draft a sworn affidavit and what to expect when a petition for annulment was filed. He spoke plainly about the timeline of injunctions and provisional measures. His words turned anxiety into procedure. We created a packet for the notary: copies of the deed, bank logs, the forged power, the list of witnesses, and my own affidavit saying I had never signed the power. The packet felt like a small army. I placed it in my bag and checked it twice, as if I were preparing for a small mission. I slept poorly that night, but with a sleep that was a tight, purposeful thing. The world noticed my change. Some people were puzzled. Senora Ramirez from the bakery left an extra bread by my gate and looked at me with an expression that asked things without words. A woman from church dropped by with a thermos of soup and a hand on my shoulder that said, simply, "We see you." Those gestures were small, but they steadied me. Not all gestures were kind. A cousin who used to come by to borrow sugar called once and said, with the airy voice of someone practicing civility, "Why make such a fuss? Can't you forgive and move on?" The question was a stone. It hit, but it did not sink me. I had learned that forgiveness is not a free pass for theft. I placed 2 notes in my notebook like vows: protect the deed, protect the children's view of justice. I did not want the children to learn that the quickest solution is to strip another person of what they built. I wanted them to learn that dignity has a price and boundaries are a kind of love. That sentence felt heavy and necessary. Martinez said the notary could file an injunction to stop any further transfers and to freeze movement of funds to the buyer. He explained that we could also ask the court to cancel the sale and order restitution. He spoke of criminal complaints for falsification of documents. He spoke of strategy without spectacle. For the first time, the legal language did not feel cold. It felt like a tool that would answer what had been done with a precision that emotion lacked. I had to do something about safety. Martinez suggested a temporary restraining order asking that Eduardo stay away from the property during the legal process. The thought of that made my stomach tighten in a different way, not fear, but the memory of nights when I had stayed silent to avoid shaking a household. Now the law would be the wall. I started to practice saying simple boundaries out loud. I said them into my pillow at night. You will not enter my house without my permission. You will not touch my papers. The practice made them real. Saying them aloud day after day lessened the sound of them in my mouth when the moment came to speak. There was a small, practical humiliation. I had to ask for money advances from old employers to pay for initial legal fees. It was a hard call because I had given years of my life to those same households. But they responded with the dignity of people who knew me. Senora Lopez handed me an envelope pressed with a look that said, silently, repay when you can, but right now take this. I took it, and the money felt like a shared defiance. I wrote an email to the buyer's agent. I kept it brief, formal, and factual. I attached copies of the notarized records and wrote that the sale was under dispute. I did not write about betrayal or emotion. I wrote facts, dates, transfers, identification numbers. I asked politely for a pause in proceedings while we investigated. The email was a small legal lever. I practiced my calm for the day of the meeting I intended to stage at the notary. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would hold my papers, how I would not cry unless the tears were part of truth. I practiced silence for when others tried to drown reality with excuses. I practiced looking at Eduardo and seeing only what the proof revealed, not the man he wanted to pretend to be. I set small traps of clarity. I prepared a folder with timelines, when the app transfers happened, when the buyer wired the first deposit, when the powers were recorded. Timelines are merciless. They slow excuses down to the pace of dates and signatures. There is no room for sentiment in a ledger. I also prepared for the children. I called Sophia and Daniel's school and arranged to have them at my house the next weekend. I wanted them safe and present, to feel that the house had anchors beyond the adults' arguments. That decision was as much about love as it was about show. The little ones should not feel their home is a chess piece. The night before the notary meeting I did a small thing for myself. I folded a clean tablecloth and placed it on the kitchen table. It was the same cloth used for so many family meals. I wanted the room to be ordinary in the face of legal sentences. There is power in ordinariness. It tells the world that life continues and that one will not be erased by paperwork. I slept with the file under my pillow like a talisman. I did not dream of legalese. I dreamed of the orange tree, leaves glossed with rain. When morning came, my hands felt steady. My breath was steady. I dressed simply. I put the folder in my bag and left the house with the small petition that would begin to make my life legally whole again. They would not expect me to be prepared. And that is exactly why I would be. The notary's office smelled of paper and pencil shavings. It is a sensible smell, a smell of things that bind reality. I arrived early with Martinez by my side and a folder that felt both heavy and honest. I set it on the desk like an offering to the kind of order that knew how to undo chaos. Victoria and Eduardo arrived together, hands still warm from the car. Their faces changed when they saw me. Victoria's color leached away. Eduardo's features sharpened with a practiced arrogance that did not reach his eyes. For a moment the room felt like a stage and the truth like a spotlight. I rose because my legs would not carry me seated through what would happen. I wanted my voice to be a tool. When Victoria whispered, "Mom," I heard the thinness in the word. It was a small. His voice slid into that familiar justification. He looked at Victoria as if she would hold his excuse like a glass to catch his guilt. But facts do not cup excuses. The notary pointed to the transaction log that showed money movement. The buyer had sent a deposit. The bank record existed. Martinez was precise. He showed the timeline, the day the forged power was registered, the day the buyer wired funds, the day Eduardo's accounts showed withdrawals that matched the purchases he had made. He spoke of signatures analyzed, of notary checks, of potential charges for falsification. He did not ask for fury. He asked for restitution. Victoria's voice broke in a small, sharp plea. "Mama, we were going to tell you. We didn't want you to be stressed." The words were the old script of someone trying to cover a fall with pity. She looked like a child who had broken a plate and wanted the plate mended without anger. Do not let sentiment rearrange justice. I understood the pressure she must have felt. Credit calls, the tightness of a household that thought it had few options. But my life had been tightened around other things for decades, and I would not let that be the reason to loosen the one thing that was mine. "Protecting me by stealing from me is not protection," I said. The room felt tight and honest. The buyer's representative phoned from a quiet office elsewhere, and the phone was placed on speaker. He listened as Martinez explained the ground facts. After a pause, the representative said he would withdraw his offer rather than be entangled in a legal dispute. It was pragmatic. The buyer did not want a scandal. Money tends to prefer cleanliness to controversy. That withdrawal meant the first victory. The sale was on hold, the buyer would reverse the payment, and the notary could move to formally annul the transaction. Martinez suggested a conditional agreement for restitution and drafted terms that would ensure the funds were returned before any further action. The paperwork moved like machinery grinding into motion. Eduardo's face had a color I had seen once before in men who are surprised by limits. He tried flattery, then bargaining. "We can live together," he offered, as if homelessness were a modest favor to give me. He proposed to compress my life into his rooms as if my history could be folded into his convenience. I answered plainly, "I will not move because you decided to gamble with my home." The words were light but they held iron. I did not want to exile my life into someone else's comfort. I wanted to keep what I had built. The notary then read an unexpected measure, a temporary restraining order preventing Eduardo from coming to the property during the process. He explained it as a precautionary step. Even in the hush after that announcement, I felt relief like cool water. It was not vengeance. It was protection. The lawyer added another condition: we would not file criminal charges immediately if restitution occurred and if Eduardo complied with treatment for his gambling, along with a repayment plan. He used the words restitution and accountability. Those words were not mercy. They were practical boundaries rooted in law. Victoria sobbed then, deep and ragged. "Mama, forgive me." She stretched her hands across the table as if to take my hand. The gesture was human and raw. A mother hears that plea and the instinct to reach out is a powerful current. I felt it pull. I did what I had practiced. I let my hand rest between hers and then pull away gently. "I cannot fix what I did not know in time," I said. "Trust will be rebuilt with honesty and actions, not promises." I wanted her to understand that forgiveness is not an on-demand blanket. It is earned with truth and time. Martinez finalized the documents. I signed the annulment with a steady hand. Each signature felt like a stitch in a seam I would later mend. When the notary handed me a stamped copy, I pressed it to my chest. It was a small, legal talisman. It smelled like ink and it felt like recovery. Outside the notary's heavy door, the sunlight seemed sharper. I had not expected catharsis. I had expected procedure. But there is a kind of quiet joy that comes from being treated as an equal to the law. It is not theatrical. It is the relief of being recognized. They asked me not to pursue criminal charges. They asked for compassion. I wondered whether they understood the difference between compassion and convenience. Martinez said we would pause the criminal complaint as long as the conditions were met. That pause was a contract of hope between justice and family. I accepted it for now. I needed the money returned and the children safe. The law can be patient, I could not be. That afternoon, after the notary, I went home with copies and small promises on paper. The house felt both the same and different. I walked through rooms that had borne my life and felt the weight of having protected them. The orange tree cast a long evening shadow on the kitchen tiles. I sat and rested my palm on the deed. It was a quiet victory. But the change was not only legal. It was practical. Martinez set dates for restitution. The bank agreed to monitor transactions. The notary recorded the annulment. The restraining order had been filed. Eduardo would have to show proof of therapy and a plan to pay back small sums immediately. The law was making the family recalibrate. I did not want to break the children's world. They loved their father, and children love without the ledger of consequences. But a world without boundaries is not a safe world. We had to make different room for love and for justice. That evening Victoria came by with a bag of groceries. She stood at the gate because she knew to respect the boundary for now. She kept her voice small. "I'm sorry," she said again. This was the beginning of a long repair, not the end. I offered her tea and a quiet place at the table. We sat like two people learning the grammar of apologies. Kalei, mas neo skc. When the children came the next weekend, I welcomed them with the same careful normalcy I had used for years. Food on the table, stories read, small chores shared. They did not need the details. They needed certainty that their routines were intact. I gave it to them. Children thrive on ordinary anchors. I was determined to be that anchor. At night, when they were asleep and the house sighed, I opened the folder and looked at the copies again. The ink was proof. The dates were proof. The law was a system that could set wrongs right if you fed it with facts. I had fed it. I did not expect immediate reconciliation with Eduardo. I expected work. I expected therapy to be a beginning, and restitution to be slow. I expected to have to keep being vigilant. That vigilance is a different kind of labor from cleaning a house. It is labor that guards a life. On the way to bed, I stopped by the mantel and touched a photo of Victoria as a child. I whispered the truth out loud: I will protect this house. I will protect this life. The whisper was a vow and a warning. They said we could move past it if they made amends. I nodded, but I also understood that past is not erased by promises. It is rearranged by actions. The next steps were already planned. But there is always a quiet breath before the next turn. I took it. The truth had been spoken aloud. Now the work of living with that truth began. 6 months have passed since that calendar of small battles began to turn in my favor. Time does not heal everything. Time teaches how to live with the scar. I still live in the same house with its yellow walls and the orange tree that drops blossom with an old patience. The blossoms now feel like small medals. Victoria and I have a new rhythm that is careful and honest. We began speaking on the phone more often. She visits once a week, usually alone or with the children. We do not speak of Eduardo unless the conversation requires it. There is a distance that is respectful rather than vengeful. That distance is a kind of healing. I taught myself small digital skills: how to save a PDF, how to make a time-stamped folder. Those tiny skills felt like reclaiming territory in a world that had tried to call my life a transaction. There are days when I am still angry. Anger visits like a straightforward companion that tells the truth about injustice. But anger no longer makes me act in ways that make the future worse. It is a teacher. It reminds me that dignity is not an optional virtue, it is a necessity. Victoria asked me once, quietly, "Will you ever forgive me?" I looked at her the way a gardener looks at a plant that has been pruned hard. There will be new growth, but the old scar remains. "I am forgiving," I said, "but forgiveness is a path, not a switch." Trust has to be rebuilt, like a wall that is repaired brick by careful brick. You are on the job of rebuilding. I will watch the work. There are small rituals I return to because they anchor me. Mole on Sundays. Pruning the bougainvillea. Cleaning a shelf and setting one precious thing on it. I label the file with the deed and tuck a small note that says, "For tomorrow, stand guard." The rituals are not defenses. They are daily statements of continuity. I still visit Martinez's office sometimes with coffee and biscuits. He smiles and asks about the garden. We speak about legal work and the lives behind it. Lawyers are often portrayed as cold, but he was not. He helped me convert anger into process. He helped me see that the law can be a tool of protection, not only punishment. The community meetings I started attending have grown. Women come and share quiet stories of signatures that were copied without consent, pensions diverted, petty thefts of autonomy. We exchange contact numbers, a small network of eyes and witnesses that says, "We will be present." We are not a rescue squad. We are a guardrail. Some wounds remain tender. I do not pretend the family is whole. Trust is like pottery repaired with gold. It can be beautiful, but the seams remain. I prefer that to a smooth lie. I prefer honesty to convenience. People ask me now, sometimes, if I regret the fight. It is a complicated question. I regret the betrayal. I regret the pain it caused everyone, including the children. But I do not regret standing for myself. To regret that would be to diminish all the mornings I rose early, all the plates I scrubbed, the years I gave to 3 meals a day. To regret standing up would be to betray my own life. What I have learned is simple and hard. My value is not measured by how much I give away. It is measured by the respect I hold for myself and the boundaries I keep. Age is not a sentence to silence. It is a place from which to demand justice. I still find myself sometimes at the kitchen window as the light thins, looking at the orange tree. A blossom falls into my palm. I keep it on the bedside table. It is a small talisman that says, "You kept this." It reminds me that preservation is an act of love for oneself. If you have read this far, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to protect something that you built with your own hands while the people you loved looked the other way? Write where you are from in the comments. Tell me, if you can, a small thing you held and would not let go. If this story reached you, please stay. There is power in being seen. Thank you for being here at the end. If you stayed, it matters. Will you stand for what is yours when those you love try to sell it away?